right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This is the James Paris edition. And today we have a very special guest. This is Alan. Alan, it's great to see you. Can you kind of give me a gist of who you are, what you're about, and also what your message is?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. Like I had mentioned, it's 9 years ago I started listening to podcasts and going on different platforms like this, and I never take it lightly to have the opportunity to speak into someone else's life. So anyone who is listening or watching on the other end, thank you for your time and attention. I do not take that lightly. I will try to honor that as much as possible. I think it's one of the most valuable assets we have is our attention. So who am I now? I'm the CEO of Next Level University. I run a 21-person team at Next Level University. That's our company and our podcast. And we have 21 departments. We do a whole bunch of different things all around holistic self-improvement. And so 9 years ago, I was 26 years old, and I had what I refer to as my quarter-life crisis, where I got in a car accident. And when I was 2 years old, my father actually passed away in a car accident when he was 28. And so when I was 26, I almost had the same thing happen to me. And it really turned my life around. It got me to question my life. It was my existential quarter-life crisis where I was filled with regret about my choices. And the best way I can describe it in the shortest form is before 26, I was very achievement-oriented and I was very improvement-oriented, but not self-improvement-oriented, not personal growth, not personal development. And so after that, I flipped the script, and the best way I can describe it is before 26, I was successful but unfulfilled. Then I actually flipped the script and went all in on fulfillment, and then ended up fulfilled and not successful. And now I'm 7 years later, after starting Next Level University, actually, I can authentically say that I'm fulfilled and successful. And so I often joke playfully, but I say being successful without fulfillment it sucks. Being fulfilled without success also sucks. It's just not as much. And I think in the 21st century, we all have an opportunity to be our own unique flavor of successful and fulfilled. And so that's really what my message is.
Excellent. And what did it sort of feel like to go through that at such a young age? And how did you get through that experience? Did you sort of have to take the mantle almost as the father at a very early age? Because I've heard that's sort of what happens in those types of situations. And it must have been a really, really tough experience for you.
So when you're growing up, you don't really know any different. So it was definitely tough for sure. I had a stepfather from age 3 to 14. My real last name is actually McCorkle. I never used to talk about this publicly, but now I finally have the courage to just own my whole story. And so from 3 to 14, I had a stepfather, and I took his last name at age 7. For the Greek community, people that they hear the name Lazaros and they go, "You blonde hair, blue eyes, I don't understand. Why is your last name Lazaros?" That kind of thing. But so my real last name is actually McCorkle. My dad's name was John McCorkle, and he had a big Irish Catholic family. So my mom and papa, my grandfather and grandmother, had a lot of kids. So they had Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joe, Jeanette, 6 J's. And to answer your original question about the man of the house thing, when my stepfather left at 14, we kind of didn't talk a ton to the McCorkles because we were being the Lazarus's. And then when he left, he not only took 90% of the income with him, but he also took his entire extended family with him too. And then at that same time, my mom actually got in a fight with her sister, and we sort of got ostracized from her side of the family too. So by the time I'm 14 years old, in some ways, I kind of lost 3 families. Fortunately, the McCorkles, my birth father's side, really took us back with open arms. But for them, I think in some ways it was kind of like seeing a ghost because I look a lot like my dad. And really, it was when my stepdad left, he got the yacht and the apartment building. We got the house and the dog. We went from upper middle class, doing well financially with my stepfather, because he worked for a company called AGFA doing hospital computers during the late 90s, early 2000s. And now when he left, I get free lunch at school because our income is so low. My mom trades in her BMW for a Honda, and even if I do get into my dream college, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford it, because my dream college at the time, WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, it's kind of like a mini MIT, was $50,000 a year back then. And for me, that was my dream, to be an engineer. And I did end up going. I got in, and I got, fortunately, a lot of financial aid and scholarships. I think in many ways, my trauma response in hindsight to all of this adversity or these challenges, particularly at 14, was just always aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Fortunately. And I don't think that that's particularly normal. And I partied a lot too. I certainly was not perfect by any means, but for some reason, whenever things got really hard, I always aimed higher, worked harder, and got smarter. And that was kind of the way I got through it.
When I hear Irish and Greek, those seem like two extremely polar, very different sides. And, that must have been a very interesting situation. So what culture did you actually maybe lean towards or embrace more? And did that culture maybe play a role in a bit more of your success and sort of who you are today?
The Irish Catholic McCorkle background was very different than the Lazaros side of the family. But I think the whole thing, more than anything, was me figuring out who I am and what I am. And now I'm 35. I often playfully joke. I say I'm hoping to hit puberty at 36. But anyway, so when I didn't start doing therapy until my 30s, and in my 30s, I started really rewatching the movie of my own life. And I've been doing this every year for my entire adult life, really. But in therapy, that's when it really started to land in a different way for me. And so I highly encourage that. I always playfully joke. I say, guys can't even ask for directions. Never mind, get a therapist, right? But anyway, so I reflected on my past a ton. And I rewatched the movie of my own life. I always use Finding Nemo as an example because I rode my bike to school when I was in middle school to see Finding Nemo back in 2003. And I rewatched that movie on my second date with my beautiful girlfriend, Emilia. And I it's like rewatching a movie that you saw as a kid, but now you're an adult. Nothing changed in the movie. Something changed in you. Your awareness is higher. You understand the jokes you never understood before. There's actually adult jokes in there that you never got before. And so for me, I've rewatched the movie of my own life from this higher sense of awareness, from my 35-year-old lens. And it's very, very obvious that I was very lost. But I didn't feel any more or less lost than anyone else. And I definitely wasn't vulnerable and honest externally with people about my trauma. I didn't really know what trauma was. I didn't particularly identify as someone who had a ton of trauma, even though I very clearly did. I didn't know how much adversity that I had. Now I understand the statistics, and there's something called adverse childhood experiences. It's an ACE score, ACE, and it's very well researched. And I had a very, very high ACE score, even though when you're a kid, you don't know that. And so it's only later on when you look back and realize that you were kind of lost. And after 26, I just refocused my entire existence on how do I become a better version of myself. Instead of trying to run away from pain and trauma and achieve significance, I'm gonna turn the mirror inward and really look at who is Alan. Who is Alan really? Is he McCorkle? Is he Lazaros? Does he own his own thing? What am I really like? And what are my real core values? What are my real goals? Who do I really want to be? Am I proud of the man I've become? What would make me proud of the man I become? So it's a whole existential thing. And for those of you who don't know what an existentialist is someone who's constantly questioning the point of it all. Why are we here? Why do we exist? And I think the only wrong answer in life is to not ask that question. Why? What is your purpose? What is your calling? What are you passionate about? Who are you? Why are you that way? Was it your past conditioning? Was it natural? Was it a gift? Were you born with it? Nature versus nurture. There's all this stuff that we need to learn and figure out, because what's the difference between a child and an adult, right? The difference between a child and an adult is that the child still has their innocence, but they're naive and ignorant. And an adult is someone who's wise, hopefully, and more mature. And we all have to kind of rewatch the movie of our own life to figure out who we really are. And it's this constant duality between I know who I am and I don't know who I am. And I'm constantly exploring that and re-centering up on who I aspire to be.
So I'm just curious then, who is Al? And what role does Alan play in this idea that you mentioned earlier about holistic self-improvement? I might not remember perfectly.
No, that you got it. You got it. So, if you've ever heard of the float tank, a float tank, it's essentially a place where you go, and it's usually a spa type of environment, and they put salt in the water to the extent that the density of the water is higher than your body, so you float. And they put you in what's called a salt tank, and they turn off all the lights and they put on meditative music. You're sort of floating, for lack of better phrasing. The best way I can describe it is floating on a wet cloud for an hour in the dark by yourself. It's supposed to be a meditative experience. I've done it twice, and it's awesome. It's nothing. I didn't have like a mystery spiritual experience, but I did have a meditative state. And in that meditative state, when all the noise is quiet, because that's what life is, especially in the 21st century, it's so noisy. You rarely sit there for an hour in the dark by yourself and just think and just reflect. And so I have this framework called the learning loop, where it's humble curiosity, which leads to new knowledge leads to new choices lead to new experiences, and new experiences lead to new reflection. And when you reflect, then you go back to the humble curiosity. And in the float tank, the 2 different times I did it, I sat there for an hour in the dark, floating on a wet cloud, for lack of better phrasing. And I had this come to me, because my question is existential. What's the point? Why? Who am I, and what do I need to do? And both times, there was the same thing that came to me, which was all that's ever mattered to you and all that ever will matter to you is self-improvement. And the first time, it was personal development. So the label changed. It was personal development. The second time, it was self-improvement. And so I don't know if this is unique to me. I don't know if this is a calling, or if this is because I felt insignificant not having a dad and my stepdad leaving, or trying to get his love. I don't know exactly why, but for some reason, I always loved improvement. I'm obsessed with getting better at everything. The only difference between before 26 and after 26 is I used to hone it towards crafts like snowboarding and basketball and academics and college and partying and whatever it was, though, Beirut even, bags, yard games. I wanted to get better at everything I do. I adored it. And so the only difference between pre-26 and post-26 is I now turn that towards self. Instead of improving at Can Jam, which is a yard game, I improve myself, my own skills, my own communication, my own business, my own leadership. And so who is Alan? The best way I can describe it is I'm someone who is here to maximize his own unique potential and help others do the same. And when I'm doing that, I feel aligned. I feel fulfilled. I'm doing that right now. I'm here to try to help people maximize their own unique potential. And the key word is unique, by the way. And so goals, dreams, and self-improvement, that is just my whole world. And if you have goals and dreams and you want to improve, you will benefit from being in my corner. But the truth is, if you don't have goals and dreams and you don't want to improve, I will just be a pain in the butt. And unfortunately, I spent too much of my life around people who I was just a pain in the butt to, which really negatively affected my self-worth.
Excellent. And so the next question I have is, what is your goal in particular? Does it have something to do with Next Level University? And I was thinking back to our conversation. You mentioned that university that you were planning on going to, which was it was similar to MIT in your eyes. What happened through that situation? Did it have something to do with this Next Level University and your goals in particular?
So when I was 10 years old, my mom drove past the bottom of the hill. So anyone who went to WPI or graduated from WPI knows that it's called the Hill. And the whole school is kind of on a big hill in Worcester, Massachusetts. And at the bottom of the hill, there's the sign, WPI. So that's when you're on campus. And I remember driving in my mom's black BMW, and I was very young. And she said, "Your Uncle Merle is the track and field coach there." And still to this day, the track and field is actually named Norcross Field. That's my Uncle Merle. He's since passed away. And I remember my mom saying, you're good at math. Engineers make a lot of money. Engineers are good at math. You should be an engineer. And as a kid, I had two big dreams. I had a bunch of little ones. I want to be an Abercrombie model, and I want to be a pro gamer, and I had a bunch of little ones. But I had two really big ones that were very legit. And by legit, I mean I meant to do them. Like I intended on it. So the two paths for me that I was contemplating in the early days when I was a kid was, and me and my best friend, we were really into Microsoft and Apple. It's like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs type of stuff. And we would always debate who was smarter and PCs versus Mac. We were kind of techie. I built my first computer when I was very young with him. And I had two paths. So one was going to be lawyer, politician, president. And I now realize how weird that is, but I really meant it. I was really contemplating that and reverse engineering it and seeing how I could do it. And then the other one was engineer, MBA, CEO, like of a Fortune 500 company, tech company, like my hero, Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs is not my hero anymore, but as a kid, he was, for sure. Him and Bill Gates. And so anyways, I ended up going the engineer, MBA, CEO road. And I did. I got my engineering degree, computer engineering, got my MBA, and then I went into corporate, and I was on my way to, and now I am the CEO of my own company. But I had never intended on building a self-improvement company. That was my post-car accident existential, I'm a part of the problem, I need to become a part of the solution thing. Because I sold industrial automation equipment before 26, and I was going into manufacturing facilities selling what's called machine vision, which is the eyes of robotics, essentially. And so imagine water bottles going down a line, and there's a camera taking pictures to make sure that all the measurements are correct and the label's correct and all that kind of thing. So quality assurance stuff. And I remember thinking to myself, well, and again, this is my engineering brain, so please don't villainize me for this. But I remember thinking, okay, we have a less educated population that tends to have more children, younger. And then the more educated population, which I'm fortunate to be a part of, tends to have less children, and they tend to have them older. And so the less quote-unquote educated population tends to grow exponentially quicker than the more educated population. But unfortunately, the jobs necessary for less educated people are actually being automated exponentially. They're going down very quickly. And I was a part of that. I was in industrial automation. That I used to go into these manufacturing facilities, and I would see these pictures on the walls of these big manufacturing plants in the 70s, 80s, 90s when they had all these people. And now it's just one floor manager and all machines. And so I saw this big problem, right? I mean, we've all gone to the grocery store and seen these kiosks instead of people. That's never going to stop. That's going to keep happening exponentially. And technology's been taking jobs from the beginning of time. And that's not always a bad thing, because now we can produce more for less labor, more efficient consumer goods. That's why our quality of life has increased. So I'm not anti-technology, by the way, by any means. But what I will say is that I was in a manufacturing plant once. Picture the most famous ice cream company you can think of. And I was there, and there was 4 people checking the cartons and making sure they're good. And I remember that day I made a big sale. And I remember being like, those people don't have jobs now. And here I am, this young, early 20s, soon to be multimillionaire who is taking jobs now. And I remember thinking, well, this is going to happen with or without me. And then I went, you know what, that's got to be dumb, because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And so instead of profiting off of taking jobs, I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to create a company that helps people re-equip themselves and retool themselves for a bigger, better, brighter future. And the truth is, calling a spade, if you are not retooling, you are in so much trouble. You had better get skills, and you'd better get them quick, because technology is not stopping. And that's what Next Level University is about, is how do you become so valuable that your future is bigger, better, and brighter, even as technology exponentially improves. James, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, my mic was muted. So,
okay.
I think there's too many things, too many different directions this conversation can go right now because you've said a lot of very fascinating things. I think I want to start diving into AI when it comes to this idea of retooling because I think that's interesting. But before we backtrack there, I'm just curious. Did your perspective as an engineer perhaps maybe influence your ability to also dive into the business route too? Because you actually remind me exactly of my father. Because my father, he has a computer science degree and he has an MBA. He was never a CEO, but he did have a PhD, and he got very far with that too. And I don't know, there's something about engineers really integrating well into the business sector that I've always noticed. And I personally think engineers might have advantages in the private sector that maybe scientists wouldn't have. Would you agree on that? Or
Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing this up because I think a lot of the topics that are really important, they don't get a ton of, maybe they're not sexy or shiny, so they don't get a ton of attention. So I appreciate the question. Engineers have a huge advantage in today's age, and the reason why is because there's four modalities of thinking that I've personally uncovered. There's mathematics, which is the rarest, and engineers think in numbers. That's basically, and it's the rarest and the most valued in the 21st century. And then you've got, in the economy, by the way, in the economy, it does not mean your relationships are going to be good. Okay, so numbers is the first modality of thinking, and it's the rarest, and most people don't think in numbers. So for me, I calculate probabilities in everything. I walk into a grocery store and I calculate, okay, when will this grocery store be out of business or bought, and why? What's their P&L statement? That's not normal. I've been a weirdo my whole life with that. And I think a lot of engineers are kind of these weird, sort of tortured, low self-worth people who don't fit in. And the reason why is they just think differently than everyone else. And it comes with a huge advantage in the economy. Like if you're an engineer and you're in the economy right now, you do very well, statistically speaking, because the whole world needs more engineers because everything's about scale and online and technology. So there's that. But then there's three other modalities of thinking that are much more common. The next one is energy. Some people think in energy. I think that's probably you. I could be wrong, but I think that might be you. That's also pretty rare. And then the other two really common ones are pictures. A lot of people think in pictures, also known as imagination, images. And then the most common is words. Most people just think in words. And that's why our vocabulary being better creates more concepts we understand, which creates, you can see the world. If you've ever seen that meme online where one person's standing on books and they can see over the fence and the other person can't, it's if you have a really strong vocabulary, you are just more aware. And when you're more aware, you have more choices. And when you have more choices, you get more experiences. And when you get more experiences, you get more learning. And so the people that are learning exponentially, I just wrote a blog called How to Accelerate Your Learning. And it's really this loop of humble curiosity, new knowledge, new choice, new experience, new reflection. It exponentially ignites for people who are super humble and curious and who have big goals and dreams. But the problem is the people who don't believe in themselves, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like they don't believe in themselves, so they don't have goals. And because they don't have goals, they don't have a reason to learn. Therefore, they don't learn, which then proves that they're not capable. So it's this negative stuck cycle that never ignites the learning loop. And then there's other people who are just have tons of belief, and then they just go keep getting more and more and more and more belief because they learn. And then some of us are naturally gifted with big, beautiful brains that then neuroplasticity, the more you work on them, the better they get. And sleep's a big part of that, taking care of yourself, all that stuff. But to go back to your original sort of thesis here, I think that engineers have a huge advantage in the economy, particularly in the 21st century. The only disadvantage that engineers definitely have is, and again, I came from an engineering school and I've met dozens, if not, I've met thousands probably of engineers, honestly, in my career. And they tend to suck at communication. And I'm not trying to be mean. I just don't think they're strong communicators. And you know what's ironic? They actually think they are when they talk to other engineers. So I have a business partner, his name's Kevin, and we give speeches together. And we have given speeches to many different people. But I remember this one speech, I thought I was going to do better than he did. And that's just my truth, as arrogant as that might sound. And after these speeches, everyone would like him better. They would resonate more with him. And I would be like, I don't understand. I'm saying things. So now I understand I'm not a strong communicator to most people, but to engineers, I'm a very strong communicator. And the reason why is they understand the concepts and the modalities of thinking that I have. And to anyone who thinks in words and doesn't think in mathematics, I'm probably a little bit triggering and or I don't make a lot of sense. And so to answer your original question, the engineers of the world, statistically speaking, will always do better in the current economy, but only the engineers who work on communication constantly will be able to really be business leaders. And I think it's not usually an inherent strength of engineers to communicate super well.
That is quite interesting. So when it came to sort of this idea of communication, how did you begin to better enhance your ability to communicate on the general scheme of things? Because I'm thinking now, to shift from engineering to now getting an MBA, at the time, it was considered pretty unorthodox from what I've heard in the past. But when you did it, though, was there sort of a mental shift you had to go through, since the people that you were working with getting that MBA were a bit different? Were there different strategies you had to employ? How was that transition like, and what did you sort of learn through that transition regarding communication?
So the first thing I'll preface is just to provide context, which is I want to preface this with a couple advantages that I had, because I used to not be able to, I didn't even really understand this, but there's two huge advantages that I had in life. And statistically speaking, there's actually, when I look at my ACE score, my adverse childhood experiences, I actually didn't have many other advantages, believe it or not. I was born in a free country with equal opportunity. So I wouldn't have been, I got financial aid and scholarships that were merit-based, that fortunately I was in a country that really believed in education and invested in me. I was encouraged to aim high. My mom always taught me, aim high and you'll have choices. And I also was very blessed with a brain that's extremely powerful. So for someone who doesn't have those things, a lot of what I say might not resonate. And I understand that. I never used to understand that, by the way. I never used to get it. I didn't really look. It's this weird thing where as you coach so many people, so I'm coming up on my 10,000th hour of coaching, speaking, training, and podcasting. And so you meet so many different people from so many different cultures, backgrounds, countries, and you eventually go, okay, I'm weird. I'm like the weirdest of the weird, statistically. And so to answer your question about the MBA engineer thing, first and foremost, computer engineering they said that this is the hardest major ever except for chemical engineering. So when you go to engineering school, and WPI is one of the most famous engineering schools in the world, it's kind of one of those things where you go from high school, and I got straight A's in high school, to being the smart kid, quote unquote, to I'm just another face in the crowd, which is just weird in and of itself, because all the smartest from their high schools all go, here too. And so you go from, in high school, I'm kind of the weird, get straight A's in math, to now every one of those people goes to this college. So computer engineering was brutal. It was very difficult. It was the hardest major ever. Apparently chemical engineering's harder, although I don't know. And I just surrounded myself with the smartest people I could find. And fortunately, they helped me a ton, and I taught them how to party. But it was really fascinating times. When I transitioned to my MBA, I'm just going to be very direct, it was easy. Now, was that easy because computer engineering in comparison is so hard? Or was that easy because business and marketing and sales and that comes naturally to me? I think it's a little bit of both. And that's why it's hard to answer your question, because truth be told, I was the obnoxious kid in college that could party all night and still get straight A's on all the calculus tests without going to a single class. And so I don't really know if MBA is hard for other people, but I will say this. I coached a man, his name's Udit. I went to college with him, and we reconnected 10 years later, and I coached him for a time, and he had this really great idea for a company. Udit is brilliant, huge fan. But I had this moment where he was trying to pitch an idea to investors, He has this great idea for a new app. I'll keep it all anonymous. And I had this moment as his coach where he sat down and he asked me, he's like, how did you get so good at communicating? Because back in college, it was a running joke of, my name was Laz in college. It wasn't Alan, it was Laz. Lazaros, Laz. And Laz can talk to girls, and we don't know how to talk to girls. And it was mostly guys' school, and there was a bunch of state schools around it, and I partied, okay? And I'm not proud of a lot of that, but I was well-rounded, and I was athletic compared to the engineers. So Udit saw me as someone who communicates well and who's well-rounded in comparison to some of our peers. So he asked me, like, how did you get so good at communicating? First of all, I don't think I'm that strong at communicating, but maybe that's why I'm good at communicating, because I'm constantly working on it. And second of all, I didn't have an answer for him, so I created a list. And I created this framework called the 25 impact points of effective communication. Tonality, powerful pauses, metaphors and narrative, story, the ability to articulate different vocabulary. There's all these impact points. And so I created a little Google sheet in my typical engineering fashion. I know I'm ridiculous, but I have every single week, I've missed some weeks, but every week I try to rate myself from 0 to 10 on each of those categories to see if I'm improving. And so I have an impact score. The 25 impact points of effective communication is what I call this framework, and I've been working on it. But I had this moment with Udit, and this was really hard for me because I want to see everyone succeed. But I had this moment of, Udit, you need a business partner like me, because the truth is, the hard truth is you can work on communication for the next decade and still only meet maybe 10% of where Kevin is already right now, my business partner. He's just a strong communicator. And yeah, he can always get better, but it's a natural gift of his. Whereas Udit, English wasn't his first language. He's not a strong communicator. He thinks in math, and so he's a good communicator to everyone who thinks in math. Half the concepts he says, most people don't even know, unless you've taken calculus. And so the truth of the matter is we all have core strengths, and we all have weaknesses that come with them. So I have a core strength of self-belief. I've always believed in myself a lot, but it comes with massive blind spots. First of all, overconfidence. Secondly, I don't know that other people don't believe in themselves, and they mirror me when they're with me, so they act like they do. I also don't understand people. Everyone listening right now knows I'm a little different, and he doesn't get me. Interesting. He doesn't struggle with what I struggle with, right? And then vulnerability was never easy because I never felt super emotional because I'm very numbers. And so who is this cyborg talking on this podcast, right? And so at the end of the day, people joke about Spock, but some people actually think like that. Some people really do think that rationally. I'm hyper rational. So I spent my whole life thinking, well, everyone's irrational and lazy. No, you're hyper rational and really hardworking. And so your strengths become these huge blind spots that come with them. And so to answer your original question, my MBA was so easy for me. And I think that was because business always came pretty naturally to me. Marketing, sales, business, and after computer engineering, I feel like anything would seem easy because of how brutal it was.
Excellent. And, I like the perspective that you have, because you sort of have a very... I can see why you mention yourself as being more mathematical, because you have a very analytical way of analyzing yourself. You think of each person as having an assortment of strengths and weaknesses. Usually, I'd be honest with you, if I was talking to someone who was a bit more emotional here, they would just focus on the positive aspects of themselves and be more hyper-optimistic. And a lot of the time, people that would see that, they would either try to nurture it and say, oh, no, you're all these things, but you're looking at it from a more analytical perspective. People are a lot like chess pieces in a way, not in a Machiavellian way, but again, some people are very good at going diagonally. Some people are very good at going in straight lines. And then you've got rare people that are like the queens, which are, maybe in your case, you could go in many different directions at once.
It's a great metaphor. Yeah. I've never heard of that before. That I've never heard it said just like that before. Chess is an interesting metaphor for life. I've always liked that, but of course I would, right?
Well, to kind of jump back to this university you've developed now, What type of university is this? Is this meant to be more of an online university? Is this meant to be a coaching school? Is this meant to be an actual university or more of a teaching environment, if that makes sense?
I think the whole idea under Next Level University, Next Level U, I love that pun. Next Level U. So I'm 35, I'm going to be 36. So I think of this is Allen 3.5. And Allen 3.6 is going to be upgraded. Like if we took my iPhone 14 and we compared it to the very first iPhone back in 2007, which, by the way, we thought back then was a revolutionary breakthrough, which it was back then, but it would be garbage compared to this thing. And if I took this thing 100 years ago and I went to 1924 and I went and showed it to people, they would be like, I'd say, here's my iPhone. And they'd say, what's an iPhone? And I'd say, well, Apple. And they'd say, what's Apple? And I'd say, well, it's a company. And I'd say, well, the phone is connected to the internet. And they'd say, well, what's the internet? And I'd say, well, there's apps on the phone. And they'd say, what's an app? And I'd say, well, it's an application that is connected to the internet that, well, you're on a keyboard, you email people, and people would be like, what's a keyboard? And I'd say, well, remember typewriters? Oh. And then it would be, well, I text people. And they'd say, well, what's texting? And I'd say, the point is that this phone is all concepts that were made up by human consciousness. And people always say to me, why do you care so much about intelligence? And I think it's an ignorant question. And the reason why is because intelligence is what created all of this. We always could have built an iPhone. We just didn't know how. And so to your original question, Next Level University, what's the point? Next Level U. There's an upgraded version of you that is more capable. What's the difference between this phone and the iPhone, the original one? This one's way more capable. I can do more with it. There's more apps. There's more internet connection. It's higher speed. There's more tools. I'm just more capable with it. And so Next Level University is literally that. How do you get to the next level version of you? And the reason we use university is because university is a collective group of people that are there to learn. And I'm obviously obsessed with learning. And if you're obsessed with learning, learning is what underpins all greatness. We don't give it the credits it's due. We really don't, seriously. But think about the camera I'm on right now, StreamYard. Someone had to learn how to build that. These microphones, someone had to learn how audio works and how the internet works and how the computer's built and then the keyboard. And it's all through iterative learning that eventually becomes exponential. And so Next Level University is the idea of open source knowledge. I've always believed in open source knowledge. I'm sick and tired. I paid $50,000 a year to go to school. That's not fair. Not everyone can go. And I wouldn't have been able to go, by the way, if it wasn't for my country paying for some of it. Because I was born in a state and a country that had financial aid. And I got scholarships. I got interest-free loans. My mom helped. Luckily, I got a lot of scholarships, academic scholarships, which, yeah, I earned, but also thank you so much for believing in me. And so to me, I wanted to give that back. And that's what Next Level University is. Holistic self-improvement in your pocket from anywhere on the planet every single day, completely free. If there's a kid out there, my youngest client is 18, my oldest is 63. I have 23 people on my roster. I've coached hundreds over the years. If there's a kid out there who needs help, who doesn't have a role model, and who doesn't know how to build a bigger, better, brighter future, we are here. We've got a book club. It's free every Saturday. I've been doing it for 3 years. We have monthly meetups every month. They're free. Health, wealth, life, and love. We've got a Dreamliner. We've got our own journal. This is not free. This was like $20. We've got all kinds of tools and resources for people who really want to do better. And you don't need $50,000 a year to come. And so if you want to coach, you want to mentor, you want a group coaching program, we do a group coaching program every quarter. We have 15 groups. So the 15th group actually starts on July 9th. We're on group 14 now. The team name is Inspired Impact. But it's a group of 10 people it's a collective group of people that all want to achieve their goals and dreams. We have a habit tracking app. So to me, Next Level University is a collective group of people online, completely online. Although we do an in-person event every year called Next Level Live. Although this year was a hybrid. We did it in March. It was half online and half in person, and next year I think it's going to be fully online because the in person was an S show. It's a lot of work, but I wanted to bring open source knowledge to people. And yeah, if you want business custom coaching from me or podcast coaching from Kev, you're going to have to pay to play. But most of what we do is completely free, just like this podcast. And so that's what Next Level University is all about. And I hope that we can attract more and more people because we all learn from each other and it makes us all better. James, are you still there?
I'm still there. Don't worry.
Okay.
It's just my camera. But just to kind of go into this a bit deeper, does Next Level University have some type of certificate or some type of certification or some type of general requirement in order to join? Is this more of a group that is for select people who might have certain skills? How does this work?
So we do have something called NLCC, Next Level Certified Coaching, which I'm coaching coaches, and that's a certification, but that's mostly just the NLU team right now. Everyone else, it's open to anyone who wants to improve their life. And there are certain people who we have kicked out of our community, just bullies, people who aren't respectful. That's really it. The only people that aren't welcome at Next Level University are bullies. Kevin and I grew up without fathers, and we both dealt with some bullying, myself especially. And anyone who is making fun of other people or tearing other people down, they are not welcome. Everyone else is, though. Everyone else is. And so you can reach out. You can email me, alan@nextleveluniverse.com, and you can go to nextleveluniverse.com, nextleveluniverse.com, which is all things next level. The person who has nextleveluniversity.com is charging way too much money, so we just said nextleveluniverse.com. And there's a bunch of stuff on there, and so we have a book club, like I said, all that stuff. You can register. All of it's online, and anyone is welcome as long as you are not a bully.
Excellent. And what do you think are sort of the key skills that you might acquire in this type of environment? So, for example, maybe I want to become a software engineer, right? And maybe there's specific languages that I might want to learn, or I might want to specialize maybe in working with SQL databases. So there's certain types of skills I would need for that too. How would that sort of work? I would assume because of your experience, you would know more about that niche compared to maybe something along the lines of, chemical engineering, as you mentioned before. So would you introduce them to a network? Would you kind of give them more inbuilt skills, more soft skills, if you will? I'm assuming that this university is focused a lot more on soft skills and then maybe helping them to build a network that can help them to maybe cultivate those hard skills. So maybe you could connect them with people who specialize in those coding languages or specialize in those other fields. I'm just thinking in my head how this might work.
I love it. I appreciate the thought process. I think it makes a lot of sense. So the what came up for me when you were talking is NLU is about meta skills. In other words, what are the best analogy I have is the operating system. Okay, so right now we're using StreamYard, and StreamYard is a web app that's a software that runs on an operating system. And so in a computer, so forgive me for being a computer engineer, but let me give you kind of the pyramid. So the bottom of the pyramid is the hardware. And then in between the hardware and the software, in between the hardware and the operating system is firmware. And then the operating system is you either do, usually the big ones are iOS for Mac or PC. PC is Windows. So I'm running Windows 11 right now. And then on top of that, we use programs like StreamYard. And StreamYard is running on top of the operating system. And so NLU is the operating system part. It's the belief systems. It's the meta skills. Meta skill, let me give you an example. Being consistent. So people ask me often, like, what's the biggest thing that you've done in the last 9 years that's made the biggest difference? I say habit tracking. Habit tracking is a meta habit. It's a habit that keeps you on your habits. And so NLU is about the person you are, your character, your beliefs, your narratives, your habits. How do you stay consistent? How do you learn about how to build wealth, the fundamental principles that underpin everything else. Pareto's principle, how do you focus on the 20% that makes the 80% of difference? These are the things that NLU focuses on, which is the foundational core of the pyramid. To me, the only way to succeed in a pyramid, the reason I love it is because the only way a pyramid goes taller or grows taller is if the foundation goes wider. NLU is the foundational stuff. So you're not going to come here and learn SQL from me, but what you will learn is the skills, life skills of how to stay consistent, track habits, how to stay on a schedule, how to use a calendar, how to make sure you have a rolling MIT list, most important task list, how to do your email, how to communicate effectively, the skills that underpin that stuff. And so as you specialize, you're right, I can introduce you to someone. So for example, if you want to build a YouTube channel, we have someone who has one of the best YouTube channels. But that's going to be passing the baton over to them. For us, it's health, wealth, and love, fundamentals. Here's the problem. Fundamentals aren't as sexy. And so we do health, wealth, life, and love. So for example, our monthly meetup on June 6th, June 6th. It's on how to get more of the right stuff done. It's a productivity training. It's what is the right stuff? How do I stay self-disciplined when I don't feel like doing it? How do I stick to a schedule? How do I make a schedule that is stick-toable, for lack of better phrasing? It's all of those fundamental things that underpin. Because if you have a bad operating system, it doesn't matter how good your programs are. It doesn't matter how good. If you can't be consistent, it doesn't matter if you know SQL. Because you won't be consistently good enough to be the best SQL person. So again, that's just one example, but it's the under skills. You said soft skills. Makes sense. It's the character skills, the foundation of the pyramid that NLU focuses on. I think you're muted again.
This has been, an excellent interview. And, what you mentioned before was very fascinating. It's so true because you look at something like Purdue University when they offer citation advice, or Cornell University when they pushed out their well-known Cornell note-taking system. They basically give you skills that are not directly involved with what you might be doing exactly, but they're soft skills that you could utilize as well. And it makes so much sense. So to kind of dive into this a bit further and to kind of close off this interview, this is just a quick question. What is sort of the future of you, your brand, and your business overall?
So the grand future is I eventually want to create our own. So the very, very, very grand future is the 22nd century Harvard, but online. And eventually it'll be virtual reality, that kind of stuff. That's way. The shorter term, next couple decades, is how do we empower individuals, teams, and businesses to maximize their potential and their impact in a profitable way, but a sustainable way. And to make that more tangible, everything we're already doing, an amplified version of that. But there's an additional part that I'm super excited about. We're working on some software that is CRM software we're working on. We also have a habit tracker, like I mentioned. And then we're also sort of building the infrastructure of our business around of what eventually will be our own sort of Asana or our own Slack type of thing. And again, that's way in the future, so no one quote me on any of that. But the thing I'm most excited for is to eventually have our own incubator program. And so NLU will eventually invest in young talent. The young talent has an idea and a big dream, but they don't have the wisdom and the capital. And we'll have the wisdom and the capital to invest. And so if you've ever heard of Y Combinator, we'll have a sort of our own version of an incubator program that believes in entrepreneurs and believes in big ideas that add value to the world, and then creates a mentorship program, a coaching program around that to make sure that we purchase equity with our investment, and then we also have a vested interest in making sure the company succeeds long term. And the company has to be aligned and good for the world, because if it's not, we're not interested. And so that'll be a big part of it too. But we got a lot of other stuff too. We got our own production company, Next Level Podcast Solutions, that's underneath the NLU umbrella. We produce 35 podcasts right now. It's actually more than that now, I think. I coach 23 business owners. We have relationship talks coaching with my girlfriend and I. So we got a lot of stuff going on, and all of it is around how do you improve yourself and your business and your mission to have a bigger, better, brighter impact that's more profitable and improves the quality of life, not only of you, but of the world at large.
Excellent. And just to close this off, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would you exactly say to him? What type of advice would you give to him to get you to this point where you're at right now when I'm doing this interview?
The most important advice would be have the courage to trust yourself. And I don't know if that's good advice for everyone, by the way. I do think that some people need to trust people that are ahead of them more. I think in hindsight, many of my mentors, I realized didn't know what they were talking about. But maybe that's just in comparison to me. I don't know. So have the courage to be yourself. Have the courage to trust yourself. Have the courage to speak up for what you believe in. And try not to conform so much. I did so much conforming. I mean, it was just a waste of time and effort, to be honest. I shouldn't have. I always knew. Listen to your intuition. Listen to your calling. Stop wasting time on things that you just don't care about. Stop trying to want things that you don't. And just be you and keep uncovering who that is. I feel like I spent a lot of time wanting to go to concerts and wanting to be like other people, but it never worked. That was a losing game. I never really cared about any of that stuff. And maybe they do. Maybe you like concerts. That's fine. I'm weird. And just own your weird is what I would tell my younger self. Stop
conforming. That's definitely the most unique type of advice I've heard so far on this show. Thank you for that insight. And are there any closing words you'd like to say to the audience? Any types of content or links you want to push out here now, or anything else you would like to tell people?
Next Level University is our podcast. It's really, we do an episode every day. Get 1% better per day, and your whole world can change. nextleveluniverse.com. I already mentioned that. Spelt just like it sounds, by the way. And the only parting words I would say is, who you are when no one's watching is what's always going to matter most. And if you can learn who that is and amplify it by growing it and grow from that place, instead of trying to achieve this goal to become this person, what if you uncover who you really are, good, bad, or ugly, and then work on that? Everything, I think, will open up for you. And at very least, you'll be more fulfilled. Maybe not as successful in the status realm, but you'll definitely be more fulfilled.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Alan, for being on the show. This has been very educational, and this has really been a privilege both for me and everyone else watching this. And yeah, I'd also like to thank everyone else for watching this show, and I will see you all next time.
Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, it's an honor. Appreciate it.